Allan, warm welcome to Startup Grind. We're absolutely thrilled to have you here with us today.
Hi, Jens. I am thrilled as well.
And I know that since you are joining from the US, I should probably say good morning.
Yes, it's 6 a.m. right now, but I have strange work hours, so I just made my last call at 11 p.m. last night. So
We do appreciate you taking the time.
no, it's okay. I have my time split between the U.S. and Hong Kong. I have clients on both sides, so I have two different work schedules in a day.
It keeps you busy.
It does.
We got to know each other through Tracy, who's going to come in here as well. But to kick things off, could you share a little bit about your background of yourself and the journey and what people should know about you?
Sure. I'm located in Blacksburg. That's in the southwestern part of Virginia on the east coast of US. Like I mentioned earlier, I split my time between Hong Kong and the US, but I have clients all over the world. My background is I've been teaching, training, and coaching negotiation for 18 years. My master's was in conflict analysis and resolution. A little bit about myself. My wife and I have 6 kids. My oldest is 30, and I'm a grandfather. Some of my hobbies, martial arts and riding motorcycle. That's me.
Okay, cool. You're also an author of the book, The Negotiation Mythbusters.
Yeah, I wrote that with a friend and partner of mine, Dan Oblinger, and we wrote a Negotiation Mythbusters because there's a lot of books out there on tactics, right? How to say what you want to say. And we realized that even when people learn the tactic, they were able to execute it when they were on the hot seat. And that's because they didn't have the right mindset. For instance, how can you stay curious and respectful when you cannot regulate your own emotions? And that's a mindset work.
So, like having a North Star in what you do.
Yeah, if you have the right mindset, then you can naturally express your tactics in a very natural way. Whereas people who learn tactics, when they're actually in a negotiation, they become like a robot. So that means that they'll execute a tactic, and then when they get stuck, they don't know how to flow. They lose the natural flow of it, kind of like a machine. And then when they get stuck, they come across a little clunky in terms of their communication.
Yeah, I can see what you mean. Is you memorize something and then when you forget it or you get to the end, you don't know what to aim for. So having the mindset is something to fall back on.
Exactly.
And I imagine that we'll bump up against some of those myths today so that we can also bust them, which will also help us.
I hope so. I hope so. Yeah.
And we do these startup grind interviews. Each chapter does one a month, and I love to prepare for them and to learn more. And when I started to prepare for this, I started to see negotiations everywhere, from personal, like you negotiate what should we watch, to shopping, and also, of course, then you think of that natural bigger negotiations such as business or the COP29 climate negotiations which are taking place right now. So when I look at the subject, like, oh, it's everywhere. But how do you see these different levels of negotiation, personal, professional, and global? How do they connect and influence each other?
Well, when I look at negotiation, it can be as simple as negotiating for a little penknife at the flea market, or you're negotiating on a global stage, like you mentioned, and you're promoting peace within a conflict zone within two tribes that have been fighting for the last 10 years, for instance. But where I focus my work is with commercial or the private sector. So helping companies negotiate with companies or professionals with other professionals. So that's where my work comes in. Negotiation spans anything from buying, selling, merger acquisitions, conversations and strategy that goes on in the boardroom. Pretty much every conversation we have at work, when you're trying to think about this, if you are trying to negotiate with your employees as a leader, you are trying to negotiate. You're trying to get them to do something. If you are trying to get a promotion or you're trying to get a raise, you are negotiating. If a customer calls in and they're upset and you need to de-escalate and keep them as a customer, you are negotiating. If you want to buy something and you're looking for a discount, you are negotiating. You're trying to get a new client, you are negotiating. So much of our conversations at work involves negotiation. In fact, the minute I have to make a decision and I have to influence my counterparty to make a decision, any decision, we're in a negotiation.
Yeah, so it is everywhere, even though we might not think of it, but it is there. Now, from your perspective, what are the main steps and goals that you should have in a negotiation? Are they universal or do they shift depending on the context?
That's a very good question. Context drives most, if not every, negotiation. So I go back to what we said earlier. If I'm in a flea market or I'm trying to buy like a little widget, or let's say I'm trying to buy something I would like to have, but it's not critical, then usually we're just negotiating over the terms. We're haggling over the price, right? If I'm doing negotiation in a business setting, then it's a little bit more formal. I have to prepare properly. I have to brief my team. I have to have a checklist ready. I have to make sure that we know what our desired outcome is. We know what the problem we're trying to solve. And we go in, we interact with the other side. We come back, we debrief. We have a follow-up email to everyone to make sure that everyone's on the same page. And then what the next step looks like, there is a process to it from one step to the next. And then when you go into like a conflict resolution between two countries or two tribes, now there's a core problem, but then there's a lot of different, like what we call peripheral problems, right? So maybe you are having a dispute over energy or a supply of oil. But now you have all these different like tariffs or sanctions, and you have a lot of different, maybe even a battle that have already started. And all those have to be resolved. There's symptoms, there are underlying root problems. And so the scale and the preparation and the process for different negotiation depends on the context. So you're right.
As you said, from the pen and knife that you are, hey, I might not need it, but I want it, to these big multi-dimensional negotiations where there are so many different issues that can then pop up, which I guess also is for this talk, since we're talking about AI, everything in AI is multi-dimensional, where we are used maybe to 2 or 3 dimensions.
But there's some common variables. So you think about any kind of negotiation, whether it's in the flea market all the way to the global or the commercial, you have to have connection. You have to have a human connection somewhere. Someone has to be able to listen to someone. There has to be, right? We have to understand what the problems are. So active listening is a skill that can transcend from the flea market to the commercial to a conflict zone. So there's certain skill sets. If you learn it, it will be able to help you whether you're doing one-on-one interaction or one-to-many in a global stage.
Yeah, active listening is a super important skill. If we go back and maybe also look at what you wrote in your book, but what are the sort of common traps and myths that we should try to avoid falling into when we think about negotiations?
God, the whole book is filled with, I think we have almost like 40 different myths. And that's when we finish writing the book, we realize there's a whole lot more other myths that we believe or we make assumptions about that is not true. Not all negotiation has to be a win or lose, right? It's not a competition. No one has to win and no one has to lose. We both just need to move our efforts and our mission and purpose forward. Some of the myths in negotiation are assumptions. We make a lot of assumptions, or that negotiation is the power of walking away. We don't have, in fact, I don't coach walk away. I teach my clients how to invite the counterparty to walk away. We don't walk away, right? The teamwork, a lot of people that negotiate, this is a skill that I have to learn. This is a negotiation I have to conduct. And they're not really thinking of a team. And this happens in sales a lot. You have someone who is selling, let's say, software, and they bring in a software engineer to the meeting. And inadvertently, the software engineer may undermine the sales because he's saying something that is not in alignment with the purpose of the meeting. And so sometimes they inadvertently undermine each other because they're not working as a team. Right.
Yeah, I can see that happening. You want to be helpful, but suddenly it's something might not cost maybe as much as you think. Now, you're in the US, I'm in Hong Kong, and we have an audience from all around the world. So we have so many different cultures also around the world. How much does cultural aspects flow into negotiations?
Well, it depends on the level of negotiation we're involved with. The type of negotiation that I coach my client on is helping people make effective decisions. So it's a decision-based negotiation. Of course, there's a level of culture overlaid on if we're doing global business, because we all have heard of like the individualism in the West and collectivism in the East. So, but we also have cultures within the West that care about the community. So think about the Amish. So even though you're in an individualistic culture in the West, You have cultures within the culture that are very collective. Amish, Mennonites, or just think about the motorcyclists, right? The Harley Davidson folks. They have a culture within. And then you go to, let's say, Asia, like China, Japan, where relationship means a lot, saving face means a lot, where the community, the bigger context is more important. But then you have individuals that act on their own selfish ambition. So that has now become an idiocentric approach to negotiation in a collectivist context. So it's very complex. There's hierarchy, there's individualism, there's collectivism, there's decision making. All these affect how we negotiate with another culture. Right. What I found out is because my clients, like the ones in US, are negotiating with Asian counterparts, and then my Asian clients are negotiating with European, Australian, or US counterparts. The key thing that I found out was most important, if you don't understand another culture, is to be curious and to be respectful. And that's a big key to helping people negotiate with someone in a culture that you don't even maybe you don't really quite understand. But if you can show respect, the other party can give you a lot of leeway into making faux pas.
I think that's a great point. And as you said, if you show that you're curious about the other person and where they come from, then, hey, I'm asking questions. So then you quickly learn.
It's almost like in some jobs, let's say you are a waiter. I remember like maybe 40 years ago when I was in college, gosh, like 37 years ago, as a waiter, I found out that a lot of the mistakes that I made were excused if my customers knew it was my first day or my first week, right? If you say, oh, sorry, this is my first week, all of a sudden the other side just gives you a little bit more leeway into making silly mistakes.
Yeah, and because we all been there, the first situation or the first times to
Exactly.
Tokyo, Beijing, or so. As you mentioned, you work with a lot of clients to help negotiate and as a negotiation coach. Could you share some insights into sort of the role that you typically play at the negotiation and how do you guide your clients to the successful outcome?
So that depends because in the past, for instance, I used to be embedded in a team with my clients, and so I am part of the negotiating team. So these days, I cannot do that anymore because as soon as you Google my name, my counterparty knows who I am and brings up a lot of war. So I coach my client from behind the scenes. And there's two ways that I coach that. One is I coach them before they go into interaction. Like last night, I coached a PR client that is working with a multinational company and they're having a merger acquisition and it could affect the stock price. So I'm coaching them to coach their client. And so we prepare the negotiation. On the other side, I may be actively in the negotiation, but my client's counterparty does not know it. For instance, I'll be on a whiteboard. My client is on a conference call, or they may be on a laptop, but the counterparty doesn't see me, and I'm writing on the whiteboard like tips: do this, don't do this. I'll circle something and I'll put a question mark. But because I've coached them before, the dynamics is easier to handle even when I'm not actively in the negotiation. But some of the insights that I have discovered, I mentioned a little bit earlier, is important to have active listening skills, and this has to be trained before the negotiation. You cannot train it right before negotiation or during the negotiation. You can't coach that. Some skills have to be learned before. Curiosity, I mentioned, respect, and one of the most important is the ability to regulate emotions, managing emotions, regulating my own emotions, and then how can I influence the emotions of my counterparty? Because if we can influence the other party's emotions, we can now change decisions.
That's a very interesting point. As you said, also certain things you cannot learn the night before. You have to have it in your mindset. Now we're talking how does AI affect all of this? We spoke a little bit before we started the event when we were testing the microphones about the good and the bad with different chatbots and so on. One thing that I do find fascinating with a chatbot is the amount of information it can keep in its mind, and then I can ask questions to it. From your perspective, how is AI changing the way we negotiate?
That's a very good question, and we can talk for a few days about that. But in the next few minutes, like how does it change our negotiation? Is AI can be very effective, and so it is 24/7. So you mentioned chatbot, and that is just one aspect of AI. What it does is you have a database of information, and it can process that information very accurately, very thoroughly, and it can process a lot. Whereas if you're training an employee, they may know of it, but they may not remember it at the time that they're interacting with a customer. So when you go to a chatbot and you're looking for information, you may get more information quicker with a chatbot than with a person. The problem with chatbot is when it gets stuck or you're asking a question that is nuanced, then it will keep on repeating itself and it gets stuck. And we've all been in that situation where we stay frustrated, try to continue asking the chatbot questions, or I just type agent, please. And then I go straight. Hopefully, it's within working hours and they transfer me to a live agent. But in terms of how it affects negotiation, it can be huge. And it could be live. It could be live coaching. I could be negotiating with you, and I could have live coaching on the side that the other side doesn't see. Like if I'm on a Zoom meeting, I could have it processing our information from this conversation, and maybe we had 4 or 5 conversations before. AI will be able to process everything up to this point. It's processing a lot of information. The second is if I look into the future, because this is something inevitably we all worried about, how is it going to affect? Imagine this, gents. Imagine we both have glasses, right? But we have augmented reality glasses, meaning that I could be coaching my client while he's wearing a pair of glasses to negotiate with you. I hear everything from another country, and I could be coaching and typing a response, or I can be even speaking into the response and convert it to text, and it comes up on his glasses, and only he can see it, and he can ask you a question, and now it's almost like we're a little bit like puppets.
Yeah, and that's a
This is
scary
a
one.
this is a
Yeah,
far future, right? But I
yeah,
don't know how. When I say far, it could be like 6 months from now, a year, or 10 years. I don't know.
yeah. A month in AI is not like a normal month. But yeah, I could see that also. That let's say that yes, as you said, you had the 3, 4 Zoom calls, then you have a new one, and the stress of the other person's voice, the AI can pick up on that. I maybe not as a human, but the AI can say, "Hey, something is going on there." It's not a black or white question. But are they generally good or generally sort of bad, or what are your main concerns when it comes to using these kind of tools?
That's a good question. So you talked about what we call sentiment analysis. I want to understand how my counterpart is feeling at this moment. Are they angry? Are they skeptical? Are they sad? Are they disappointed? Are they interested in my proposal? And so the pros and cons of this is with AI, you can cross the line into manipulation. So the pros is it will allow you to be more emotionally intelligent, so you can recognize emotions that we may miss in a split second. Like let's say I'm talking to you and you're making a proposal to me, and in the blink of an eye my mouth just do this. It almost I'm exaggerating. I'm like, I'm not sure I'm interested in it. But in a conversation it would be just as simple as this. And if we are talking, we can miss it.
Mm.
But with the AI, it's always monitoring it. And so with these micro expressions, it can therefore notify you your counterparty is a little skeptical about what you just proposed. And so it allow you to explain it a little bit more or address the hesitation or the disbelief or the skepticism. But in person, we may not have it. So in that case, there's a pro. The con part of that is understanding how someone feels, and then with AI knowing how to change or manipulate emotions, that you can make someone make a decision that may not be good for them. And anyone who knows me, I am highly against unethical negotiation. There are some people that teach unethical negotiation. Obviously, they don't call it that, but it's manipulative in nature.
Yeah, and the pushy. I mean, what comes to mind is the pushy telephone sales that doesn't let go.
So now they have like pattern interrupt, right? They know that people are going to hang up. So create a pattern interrupt, ask a question and engage them or confound them or give them information, and based on the other person, it can coach you to do something that will prevent them from getting off the phone. So
Mm,
it can be manipulative. It's manipulative when the other person doesn't get to say no to you.
yeah, and that's important. Allowing the other party to walk away. When we've been talking about sort of negotiation either over Zoom, Teams or Zoom call, but then we also have the kind of the, I guess, back and forth negotiation where you're emailing back and forth with somebody. So you might have a meeting, but there is a follow up. I mean, I use ChatGPT as my sidekick to help me to write emails and do stuff like that. If you were as a customer, a consumer, and you get a feeling, hey, maybe these emails are written by an AI in that negotiation over maybe a refund on the airline ticket or something like that, what should you do? I mean, what would you say is to how to act?
That depends on context. Context matters, right? So if you're talking about an airline ticket, if it solves my problem, then I don't care whether it's AI or person. If I ask for a discount and the bot immediately goes, well, thanks for notifying us of an error that we made, and here's a discount, and we're gonna refund it to your credit card immediately. I'm all about that. Instead of waiting and going through multiple people and waiting for 20 minutes before I talk to a human, maybe I prefer that. But if the problem is not solved, most times we want to talk to a live person. With in terms of AI, there's two approaches, right? You can be started, the conversation or the solution can be started as an AI, and then it can be completed with a human, or augmented with, or delivered by human, or reviewed by human. Or it could be the other way. We can start, like in your case, write an email first, and then you can have AI to clean it up, check for grammar, and maybe reframe the conversation. So both of them work. It depends on what are you trying to accomplish. So as long as the counterpart gets what they want, I don't think they really care whether it's AI. I'm gonna take a step back. You mentioned AI as a sidekick.
Hmm.
Think about maybe 40, 50 years ago, a lot of professionals have a secretary. So someone will tell the secretary, I need to write an email to Jens and I want to say XYZ and tell him that like this is this, and then invite him to a party on this Friday. And that's what they would do. They would write that email, they'll give it to the person, that's me, and I'll read it and I'll go, this looks good, but can you change the last paragraph? And then they go and change it. And then you say, this looks good. Now go mail it or email it, right? Not they couldn't email it then, like 40 feet. So 40 years ago, now mail it. So in that case, it's not really any different from that.
And the communication skill of that secretary assistant, of course, was super important because they filled out.
Exactly. Usually they have more empathy, they're better at communication, they're good at writing, right? They're good at interpreting what boss into something that they think the other counterparty is going to be receptive to, right?
Yeah, and the more the AI learns from us as well, they can also speak more and more as us. Have you picked up on any interesting ways that companies use AI to negotiate?
Yes, and that depends on, again, context, right? There are some tools. I mean, this has been used for a long time. I mean, ChatGPT, which is one of the large language models, it's been made popular in the last 2 years. But prior to that, 4, 5, 6 years ago, I have a client that specializes in AI with in the fish industry, how to recognize what kind of fish is in the water so that you're not catching the wrong fish, right? And so it can determine the difference between a trout or a salmon, for instance, right? Or a tuna and a swordfish. So it's like recognizing different patterns. And so AI has been used for many years. But in terms of like how it affects us or how we use it, it will be very difficult not to use AI in almost everything we do, from checking grammar, right, to writing an email, to responding to a threat like a legal threat. So I know attorneys right now that they rely on AI first, and they do a human review, just like I mentioned earlier. So you can have an AI machine help you. So it does a lot of different things for you. It spans every area of our work.
And that's a sort of an area where the human judgment will prevail because you need to double check that. But you get a draft in front of you much faster.
Exactly. Like it can take things from days or hours to milliseconds, right?
Mm.
So a human, our ability to build true connections, building relationships, building trust, having empathy, those are things actually that AI aren't exactly great at.
And it's just sort of two last questions before we bring in Tracy as well. So, what advice would you give young professionals or professionals of any age to sort of future-proof their negotiation skills now in the AI era?
Well, at the speed that things are going, it is very important that we learn how to use AI tools. So, finding subject matter experts in the field that you're interested in, it could be engineering, it could be any kind of like science fields, or in my case, let's say negotiation. Find someone in the field that you're interested in, learn from the experts, and then learn how to use AI, because AI is like a tool. Like, 30 years ago, when AutoCAD first came into the architectural world, a lot of architects thought that it would replace architects, but ended up all architects use AutoCAD to help them do their job better. So it's a tool. That's what AI is. We have to think of it as a tool. We have to learn to use a tool, and we have to learn to do things where AI is not really good at, which is like staying curious, innovation, creativity, building relationships, having empathy. Those are areas AI cannot do or cannot do well.
And what sources do you use to kind of stay up to date on negotiations and AI? YouTube channels, X, where do you go for information?
So if you want to learn, get started on AI, there are some online platforms like Coursera or edX. You can learn from those. Listening to podcasts, that is good. Finding books on the subject matter expertise that you want to learn about, joining forums, listening to podcasts like this on here. There's other podcasts in, let's say, in my field, like negotiation, is like the Negotiation Ninja podcast by my friend. So you want to absorb information so that you can use AI as a tool. You cannot rely on AI to do everything for you, because there's a danger, which we talked about earlier. The danger of AI is we over rely on AI, whether it's writing, negotiating. If we don't use them, we lose them.
Yeah, we have to practice them. I totally agree. Alan, big thank you for being a great guest at Startup Grind. It's not the end of the event, but thank you, and I learned a lot. I'm now going to bring Tracy in. So let's see.
Hi.
Hi, Tracy. Thank you for joining us today. I also know that you are not in Hong Kong. So where are you joining us from?
Thank you, Jens. When Alan conquers the America, I'm on the European side. So similar to Alan, we split our time. I split my time between UK and Hong Kong. And so, from a maps term, you could still remember in primary case, we talk about HCM and LCM. So our common factor whenever Alan and I in Hong Kong, we tend to meet up, and he's been a great coach for me, and I learned a lot from him, and that's why I thought you would like to talk to him about negotiation using AI.
Yeah, so you're coming from the UK. So maybe you can share sort of short about your background and the work that you do.
Yes, sure. I'm a coach as well. I am a coach, trainer, and consultant. My focus is on communications, and I run a personal branding, executive presence coaching boutique. So I work with whoever feel like they are underpaid, overwork, or prepare for a promotion, want to be seen as the leader, or reach for the next top job. These people, I help them to make them look good, sound promising, command attention, and be a great storyteller, present their ideas to catch the attention. We also worked on online presence, including like LinkedIn, website, with the content that help them, build a thought leadership in the industry.
Yeah, and that's the company called Frame and Fame.
Yes, exactly. Frame your image and message so you earn the fame.
Ah, that's a good one. Yeah. So we'll be talking about negotiation, but you also have to keep the human element. And we need, I guess, also when we also present ourselves to be sort of genuine. Alan, when you help coach companies and sort of help negotiate, how important is the human element in the negotiation to be genuine?
I will answer that question with a question. This may not be what you were hoping for, but think when the question is how important is the human when we are sad or when we are angry, Do we prefer to interact with a machine bot like a bot, or do we want someone who can listen, empathize, and validate how we feel?
Well,
Now, if you
I
can answer
guess,
that, then you'll know how important an interaction is.
yeah, no, that's a very good question. I let the audience think about that question to bring to their mind. And Tracy, when you work with clients, sort of from your perspective, how important is the human element come across in a good way?
Listen to Alan sharing in the first part, I just can't resonate more about the respect element in not only negotiation but communication as a whole. Very often we have a lot of misunderstanding because of a lot of doubts or even heated debates because of some disrespectful statements between friends, between parents and kids, clients and colleagues. Whenever we call it cross the line, right? That means some disrespectful statements come out, then people react furiously. That I would say is the human element, and that's why the human element makes, to me, it's just like the emotions, right? And emotions sometimes can be predictable, sometimes can be not predictable, and it really rests on our understanding on the counterpart, the people who are communicating with, that I would consider as the human element. So then maybe in today's discussion is can or how much computer, how much big data AI can predict that emotions in our communications.
Yeah, that's a good point. Is there a risk that we kind of, and this is a question to both of you, is there a risk that we lose the human element with sort of the availability of AI everywhere to help us communicate or type out emails ahead of time? So, and what can we do about it? And both of you.
Tracy, go ahead, go first. I'll go second, unless you want me
Oh,
to go first.
sure. Oh, let
That's
me
a
share.
negotiation.
I respect you. I will, take this first. Just, instead of answering this question, I would like to share two scenes I had in recent coaching and training. So a few months ago, I had a training sessions about communications in the workplace, about etiquette and how to get your message across with your seniors. It's among middle to senior managers, how they can get the CEO, the director's green light, right? And I gave them a in-class assignments, and someone stood up very confidently, read his write up, and I could immediately tell it's not from him, it's from AI. And so that's one scene. Then another scene is from one of the recent coaching just 2 weeks ago, and a client talking about preparing her town hall, and then she brought a speech to say, hey, can you coach me on this? And then, looking at the body language and stuff like that. But the speech, when I heard her, it lacked what I told her right away is lacking the soul. Okay. And then she then, admits that she did use a lot of AI to type up the script. What I want to say with these scenarios, I mean, real examples, is that these, no matter you're in work, in class assignments, or your speech, yes, within like 3-5 minutes, you have a paragraphs of beautifully written words. I can't say even message, right? There's a from a communication perspective, there's a difference between a bunch of text or lines, paragraphs of words, versus a message. Message has a meaning that speaks to your audience minds. And nowadays, I think we can still tell whether those words come from a person's heart. So then when you speak to your mind, you'll ask me, okay, how to keep the human element, or will our communication be replaced by AI? I would say that nowadays it's very hard to avoid 100% that we write something out from scratch with time pressure and many other factors. But then it is very important for us to really think about what sort of message you want to blend it in. Are you inputting your own soul, your message in the words, no matter you write it or your ghostwriter write it or AI write it? Similarly, are you also taking into your counterparty's concern, their emotions, their potential thinking when you communicate, when you write or when you speak? Does that answer your question? Maybe Alan can come into further my thoughts.
Yeah, the risk for AI, like any tool, when it's over reliant upon, can create polarization. Polarization in that those that have good skills and continue to develop those skills with intention become great. Whereas those that were not so good, if they over rely on these automations or AI, will become very poor. And I'll give you an analogy. It's like driving. So I grew up in a time where everyone learned of a stick shift, but now we have automatic cars. So because we have automatic cars, we're over reliant with a lot of technology, with like maybe staying in lane, like or blind spot notifications, maybe even some auto driving with electric. So people get distracted with texting, or they're doing different things, or they're having conversation, and it causes accidents, for instance, right? The other side of the driving is we have people that are stunt drivers. And if you look at what stunt drivers can do these days, they are so much better than stunt drivers like 50, 60 years ago. Whether it's stunt motorcycle or stunt driving, it is so much better because they are mastering the skill of this manual manipulation of the machine versus those that rely on the machine in order to not have to develop their skills. It atrophies. So the polarization becomes more and more severe, and there is missing that middle part. So it's the same with any tool. So the AI would develop people that are really good if they know their skills, if they have a very specific skill set and they develop that, and then they use AI, they will be much better versus those that think I can rely on negotiation with AI, and therefore I don't have to learn negotiation and practice with an intention, and therefore their skills would deteriorate. And when they have in front of someone and they don't have AI next to them, they're going to be struggling.
And I think that's a great point, as you said. If you want to become a good negotiator, you want to become a good coder, a good doctor, and then you let AI augment and help you.
Exactly.
If you're lazy and say, "Oh, it can write the code for me," then it's not going to be that good. Yeah, that's a very good point. Very good point. I saw this LinkedIn post from LinkedIn itself saying humans trust humans, so therefore get your CEO to post on LinkedIn, and of course promoting that service. So to both of you, like, how do you think is the best course of action for companies when they're thinking how much of the communication should we now quote unquote automate with AI, and sort of what should we still let communications department, etc., write out, and so on? Can we go too far and in either direction? Tracy?
What I heard from you, Jens, is that how much we
Yeah,
can use AI as a
yeah.
tool.
Or can we
Because
overuse it?
yeah, it can, and that's why there are multiple, I think, dialogues or discussions or even debates globally about ethical use of AI, and now they're setting ISO standards on the use of AI as well. So, do we have the standards at all? I mean, and how can we make sure people use it ethically? I think it also varies from cultures to cultures, from tech background to purposes as well. I can only speak on behalf of communication professionals and coach and train. I think in our industry, there are a lot of use of AI, and there are also multiple online, offline discussions. I'm sure you have heard some as well. It's whether communication. Do we still need PR people? All right, like what Allan said, you are coaching PR, do negotiation, and there are a lot of PR roles or communications roles can be replaced by AI. And still, so far, from what I've been to many online and offline discussion reading and blogs as well, the main thing I've seen, there are three factors. One is what we have talked about today, is the emotion side of communications. Still, at this stage, AI cannot 100% predict, or we still rely a lot of human input on. Even if you want to use AI to answer, you still need to input a lot of data to get more accurate outcome. So then the emotional element is still the wild card, still the magical factor that comes professional can host. Then the second thing is about cultural elements, and of course we've seen a lot of AI and chatbots, and from ChatGPT to and many other AI tools. It's multi-languages, but then still the cultural aspect, the historical thinking, philosophical behind it's not 100% set yet. So we have seen that not only from emotions. The second thing is from the logic and cultural sensitivity. Then the third thing, it's the choice of words. Like I mentioned to you just now, two beautifully written speeches look fine, but then when you read through it, it's still lacking the substance, the message. All right. So then the third thing is really about the complexity of the choice of words. From I can only read Chinese and English, but from what I've seen, that they master simple English and some predictable when you read the AI language more, you can say, oh, this is written by AI, and because the choice of words seem repetitive sometimes, and so then the complexity can still be enhanced with a communication professional. So then I hope that I answer your question. Is mainly about, I would say it's unavoidable to apply AI is a tool to speed up work efficiency and turnaround time. But then I advise people to still try to be close to it. Even you get an outcome, maybe you get an additional manual element, the human factor, to get that message sharpened, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think if we go back 6 months, I saw a lot of posts on LinkedIn that were obviously, unfortunately, AI generated, because then they become boring. I won't gonna read them because I could generate my own answer over here. But now I think things have improved a bit. But yeah, we want the human part. We want the real thing. But a concern, of course, would be that if there is an avalanche of AI generated newsletters, messages, and so on, then the human ones will disappear and not be seen. Not because they lack quality; it's just that there are too many others. So it's going to be interesting to see if we can, how much AI can help us sort out through these messages. We're coming close to the hour. Allan, do you want to have any last words from the US in regards to AI?
Yeah.
Think of?
So the last question or the theme of this is, how do we use AI in the workplace, or especially in negotiation? And I'll paint two pictures, right? And ultimately, it depends on what our long-term mission is. What do we want to accomplish? For instance, should we use AI if I'm negotiating as a big box company? Think Walmart, Kmart, Target, companies that buy a lot of a single item. Let's say I buy canned milk and I want to find the best price or the best delivery and what people prefer. Do you want a person to analyze 10,000 different items and make a decision each time with different suppliers? Or do you want to automate that, right? Because it's the same product I buy. Like as a Walmart, I may buy the same product every month, but I want to buy a new supplier because they can deliver it faster or cheaper because of whatever context they're in. And then you have the other side, in a merger acquisition in a company or in a marriage. Do you want a machine to pick your spouse, which is the most important decision you will make in your life? Do you want to completely rely on a machine to pick a spouse, and you show up on your wedding day and you hope for the best because the machine picked a spouse for you? Or do you want to make that decision for yourself, or the final decision? Right.
That's a really good question. And I really, both sides of that, because if you're the Walmart or the Kmart or the Target and you send out all these questions, you need to reply to them. But then, of course, you want to make that important selection of your life partner. Allan, Tracy, big thank you for being guest of Startup Grind. It's been incredibly interesting. I learned a lot. How do we connect with you, Allan and Tracy? LinkedIn? Is that the best
Jens,
way?
first of all, thanks for the invitation. For your members, the best way to connect with me is look me up on LinkedIn. My name is Allan, Allan. Last name is Tsang. That's on, you probably see on the screen. And there may be multiple Allan Tsangs, but if you type in negotiation next to it, most likely I will come up.
Great, thank you. And
Yeah,
Tracy,
same for me. I typed the link in the chat box is linkedin.com/in/Ho Tracy. And you can also, find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Google Fame and Fame. And or when you're in Hong Kong, personal branding Hong Kong, you definitely can find me there.
Yeah. And so everybody who's here, big thank you for everybody participating. See you in the next one.
Thanks for having me.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.